Lobries and Gentlegrams, in today's episode of Lobry in Gentleland, the Canadian Corcus clobbering, California bell-bottom bone-crushing kung fu killer Kenny K. Lamar allegedly labeled Drake as a prom queen predator, a teenage fever mutant turtle on the knockout song Not Like Us. Now, the maple syrup mob boss Toronto's Taylor Swift is taking it to trial, saying UMG knew the song was cap, but still put it on the map. And today, the grimace gram gobbling Big Mac Akademiks and Federal Frontier villainous Vlad TV were spilling some suspicious sauce surrounding the secrets of the spiraling sexy red stepsister stunt double. So let's unpack what they had to say about Drake's strange escapades back in the Calabasas days. And I mean, he said it himself on Taylor Made, talk about me liking young girls. Well, now you got the worst person in the world talking about that, the Fed himself, DJ Vlad, and there's some definitely disturbing things to unpack here. But first, if you made it this far, drop a like and subscribe because you are a star. Now, Lobries and Gentlegrams, it's been an insane, intense week. Big Mac Akademiks and his federal friends. After saying Kendrick Lamar killed hip-hop, making it all about battle rap, it seems like Akademiks, No Jumper, Vlad, and the rest of that side of hip-hop media have realized that if Kendrick truly is on top and fans want to start hearing more about the music rather than the RICO cases, they're gonna have nothing to report on. So they've been working overtime to make sure that their spot in media and their empires don't come crumbling down. And they're doing interviews on all of each other's platforms. We got podcasts with Akademiks, DJ Vlad, Traplo Ross, Wack 100, No Jumper, where they were talking about Big U's RICO case for 4 hours straight. I watched a Big Mac Akademiks live stream the other night where he tried touching on Kendrick Lamar's music for about 5 minutes, but couldn't help himself from completely switching subjects and start talking about court cases again. He also had No Jumper saying that he's going broke, asking for his fans to spend more money on his channel. They're working in overtime right now. That's my point. And amidst all this, Vlad and Akademiks linked up for an interview where they spoke on some pretty disturbing things related to Drake, or at least Vlad did. Of course, the Champagne Petition Padres princess, the Graham Glazing Grimace Shake, did his best to defend Drake, but you know when something comes from Vlad, how can I put this? It's very solid investigative work, to say the least. And shout out to Jalopy Bungus also. He's a great YouTuber. Suggest you guys check him out. He gets very surgical with his videos. I definitely didn't sit through this entire 4-hour Akademiks and Vlad interview, but he brought a lot of this to my attention. So I'll link his video in the description on this subject and we'll review some of the things he said as well. So first, Big Mac Akademiks tells Vlad, you know, after all the allegations that were made in Not Like Us, after Drake suing over the song because now he believes the entire world thinks he's a PDF, after jokes were literally made on the Oscar stage about Drake being a PDF, the entire world singing A minor while Kendrick performed it at the Super Bowl and the Grammys, Akademiks is surprised that no woman ever came forward and said, yeah, Drake is a weirdo. I mean, we saw with the Diddy case, which we'll touch on shortly in this video, like the second one victim came forward in that case, a bunch of civil lawsuits were filed. When it rains, it pours in the land of legal issues. And it's also like, you know, when a case is built and when the public realizes this person did horrible things, a lot of other real victims feel comfortable moving forward and telling their truth. But then at the same time, you also get people who might want a quick paycheck. So you'll have a combination of both. A lot of real victims who now feel comfortable and a lot of people chasing a check to take advantage of the damage that's already been done to your reputation. So yeah, Akademiks, you know, tells Vlad he's kind of surprised that no one ended up coming forward about Drake, especially if you think about it, right? Drake is now suing over this song, but not one person has ever actually formally come out and said Drake is a PDF. Not one victim so far.
I will say though, you know what I was impressed by? With all this and say Not Like Us and everything, people talking about Drake, not one chick even erroneously filed a lawsuit or like, I thought there was going to be a few of those to take advantage of the moment. And there's been not one person that's accused Drake of anything.
And Vlad stops Akademiks there and says he personally heard that when Drake was living in Calabasas, in the Hidden Hills in LA, there was definitely some funny business going on there, to say the least.
Yeah, but I wouldn't be surprised if some starts coming out. Well, from what I understand, when Drake first moved to like Hidden Hills, like they were wilding out in that house, and him and his homies were doing some shit that probably got covered up somehow. You know what I'm saying? And now maybe people got paid.
And I mean, we'll look into that a bit further later, right? Because he makes the interesting point in that it's possible Drake and his friends paid off people who they may have involved in some, deranged activities. I guess we'll put it at that. And we know if there is a place where, some weird stuff would go on like that, it would be in Hollywood, right? And this was during a time when Drake was at the height of his career. We did hear some stories about, Drake having weird interactions with, the Millie Bobby Browns and some other ones we'll get into shortly. That's where, Not Like Us, the PDF allegations were fueled from. And this was throughout the time that Drake was living in Calabasas in Hollywood. If you don't remember, that's, the same time that Drake made Sicko Mode, where he talked about being right up the block from Kanye, creeping down the block, made a right, cut the lights, paid a price. This was also the time that he really adopted that, phony Montana mob boss persona. So if there was any time in Drake's career where he felt like he was absolutely untouchable, it was definitely during that, 2016 to 2019 era where he was living in Calabasas, because he did put that house on the market for sale shortly after. We'll review that, but first, Akademiks, of course, comes to Drake's defense, saying that, they were probably just partying, right? Like, these were just casual parties like, anyone would do in Hollywood. But Vlad cuts him off to say, no, like, this was a situation, at least from what Vlad had heard, that people were paid off to stay silent. And he compares it to the R. Kelly situation, which is a crazy individual to compare Drake to, right? Just based off how horrible of the crimes that R. Kelly committed were, right? If Drake committed even a fraction of those, like, he should be locked up for a very long time. He was saying, like, R. Kelly suffered the consequences because video footage was released where, you could actually see the horrible acts R. Kelly was doing. It wasn't just speculation or rumors. And I guess Drake was calculated enough to at least pay people off to make sure if things were going down, no one ended up talking, no videos ended up being leaked. It was the same thing with Diddy, right? Like, Cassie, had that horrible civil lawsuit. I say horrible because the allegations made against Diddy were horrible, but things got amplified when the world saw that video footage of Diddy actually assaulting Cassie in a hotel. Same thing with Chris Brown and Rihanna, right? Like, once the world saw those pictures of Rihanna, there was no hiding anymore. At this point, we haven't actually seen any physical proof of Drake doing anything suspicious, except, of course, that very strange video of him on stage with that, woman, whatever. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about, but there's been no, like, concrete proof of Drake being a PDF, and that's why UMG, in their defense against Drake's lawsuit, is saying Kendrick's song was all hyperbole, right? It was exaggeration. It was just used in a rap battle as some sort of diss against Drake. It wasn't the truth.
I remember it was partying. No, not like.
I heard some stories, but and I'm not going to mention them.
It was getting it in type.
I mean, some things could happen around that if certain people really started to make a lot of noise, but I think
maybe he's paying them off. Like,
I think Drake is just paying them off. And so, listen, if you look at the R. Kelly situation, that whole case hinged around the video.
But if this is true, it paints a very different picture of why Drake is filing this lawsuit, why that song triggered him so much. The fact that he knows a song like that being as big as it is puts not only the risk on Drake's reputation of, maybe big brand deals not wanting to work with him anymore, maybe people now believing, the allegations Kendrick made in that song to be linked to Drake, but it also opens up the floodgates for a lot of potential victims, a lot of people potentially just looking for a payday, anyone in general to basically come forward and say, yeah, Drake did some suspect things, and the world will believe it a lot more because we now, heard it in that song amplified on a global level. When people question, what is Drake's true endgame with this lawsuit, I personally don't think it's money, right? Like, Drake has probably billions of dollars at this point. His old catalog makes more money from streaming than the 60s, 70s, and 80s catalogs all combined. All music from those decades combined on streaming platforms. Like, he can be rich off his previous hits. I don't think he's suing UMG over money. I don't think he's suing UMG to expose, record labels use bots and fake streams and fake radio play, and this is all some big manipulative tactic. No. Drake looks out for himself, right? This is something to do with Drake trying to uphold his reputation and get some big personal leverage. At first, I personally thought that he was probably suing to actually get out of his contract with UMG because they own a lot of his older music. That's the music that really makes him a lot of money. I figured, okay, if he actually gets, victory in his case, logically he'll be allowed to get out of his contract with UMG, right? Because if UMG really was, boosting artificially the numbers of Not Like Us and making it this, artificial hit to destroy Drake's reputation, like if he wins, that's what the judge is essentially thinking, then the judge logically will grant Drake access out of his current contract, and then he could go to another label where he has more leverage. He already signed his OVO label to Sony Records, so maybe he wants to go there and basically have more ownership of his music, collect more profits, make more money, etc. But now I'm thinking with these comments that there might be something bigger at play, right? If Drake wins this lawsuit, the lawsuit is on the basis that Not Like Us is spreading misinformation. Defamation is lies, of course, meant to ruin your reputation, right? And if he wins, it means that UMG acknowledges they knew the allegations in that song were false, but still published and promoted it anyways. But hey, even if he doesn't win the lawsuit, UMG's case is still that Kendrick wasn't actually talking about Drake literally being a PDF, right? In UMG's motion to dismiss, in their request that the judge tosses out this case, they literally make the argument that these PDF rumors existed long before Kendrick's Not Like Us, and Not Like Us wasn't actually saying Drake was a PDF. It was exaggerated truth. It was hyperbole. So unless UMG comes to court with like a lot more than just the internet rumors that we've already seen about Drake possibly, doing some weird things with some people he shouldn't be doing them with, then whatever the outcome of the case is, UMG's stance is that Not Like Us was exaggerated truth. It wasn't actually factual. I mean, even Kendrick on the song says certified lover boys, certified PDFs. He uses the plural, implying that he's not specifically talking to Drake, cleverly avoiding any implication of defamation because, of course, again, he's not explicitly saying Drake is a PDF. I bring all this up because Vlad is saying that he's heard Drake has done some suspect things in the past, and people who were maybe a part of that were all paid off to stay silent. Unless UMG comes to court with some real evidence of, some suspect things that Drake has done in the past, I think the whole purpose of this lawsuit, Drake filing it to begin with, is to make sure that the world doesn't believe he's a PDF and that song doesn't open up the floodgates for potential victims to end up coming forward and for him to have a lot of, legal pressure on his hands. But let's look into that Calabasas era, right? That era where Drake was living in the Hidden Hills and what Vlad could potentially be referring to and what we already actually know. But first, Lawbreeds and Gentlegrams, unlike Drake, a bunch of you guys have been telling me you've been Anita Max winning some free cash from playing mobile games. So I want to put all you guys on to something that almost seems too good to be true. All right, let me give you a little glimpse into my life. When I'm not making this content for you guys, I have a disgusting addiction to my phone. My daily screen time is higher than Drake on that album cover, higher than Snoop off the edibles. So if you guys suffer that same addiction as me, I want to put you onto something that's going to change your life. FreeCash.com is a program that partners with mobile games that are looking for more users to play their games, and they will literally pay you to play their games for free. All you got to do is sign up using the QR code you see on the screen or using the link in the description of this video. You make an account super easy. All you got to do is put in your email, create a password, verify your email, and then you're good to go. And they got a bunch of games. My favorite is the Monopoly Go because we're always on the go trying to make some money. Once you make an account, you just click the game you want to play, follow the directions that they give you. The directions are super easy. Usually you just got to download the game and start playing. So it's about time you put that phone addiction to good use. Again, use the QR code you see on the screen or the link in my description. Create an account and you could start making more than $150 just to play a game on your phone. So Drake had this house in the Calabasas, which he called the YOLO Estates. Disturbingly fitting title because YOLO stands for you only live once. It's about embracing your youth, right? Keyword, youth. And he actually ended up putting that house, or that estate, I should say, on the market in 2022. I say estate because Drake had multiple properties in the area, and they were allegedly designed for these massive parties. So let's look at this article from the Los Angeles Times, which details the different ventures Drake had in the real estate market within the Hidden Hills and how he was looking to actually exit out of any of his properties within that region. So in February of 2022, Drake dropped $70 million on a home in Beverly Crest. He had apparently been looking for over a year for a house in that region. But about a week after he actually bought that house, he went on a selling spree, selling 3 homes that he had in the community of the Hidden Hills for a combined total of $22.2 million. So it was 3 homes, and they call it a compound, essentially. It was like a massive plot of land with a bunch of different homes, and he had been compiling this compound for over a decade. He first bought an English Tudor style mansion for $7.7 million in 2012. Then he bought the ranch right next to it for $2.85 million in 2015. 3 years later, he bought another neighboring ranch for $4.5 million. And with all these properties, he created a triple lot estate that spanned over 6.5 acres. The crown jewel of the compound, the big mansion within the area, was called the YOLO Estate. And according to the LA Times, Drake had transformed this into a party house during his stay. You could see here there's, this statue of this woman in a bikini. And listen to the description of this home. It's kind of funny, honestly. The home opens to 12.5 thousand square feet of dramatic spaces with 7 bedrooms, 9 bathrooms, 6 fireplaces, a wine cellar, tasting room, bar, recording studio, and movie theater. So a lot of bedrooms, a lot of bathrooms, and hidden behind a bookshelf, the primary suite alone covers 2,000 square feet and tacks on 2 marble tubs. So Drake basically, in his main bedroom in this house, it was hidden behind a bookshelf. It's a massive bedroom, 2,000 square feet, so it could definitely fit Big Mac and Akademiks in there. And there was also 2 luxurious marble bathtubs. The article says the backyard is built for partying. Statues line a custom swimming pool complete with cascading waterfalls and an 80-foot rock water slide. Under the waterfalls, there's a grotto with TVs and a bar. There's a horse stable, a riding ring, a mechanical bull. And along with the main, YOLO estate, there was 3 houses kind of attached to it. So it was this whole compound. And he sold all 3 of those in 2022. But at the same time, he basically traded them in for this new home in Beverly Hills, which is more in the central LA area. And he actually put that Beverly Hills home on the market just a year later in 2023, about a year after he bought it, for $88 million. But as of 2025, the house actually remains unsold. So Drake still owns it, and it's available for rent for $250,000 per month. So he's not living there. He's trying to sell it. He's renting it out. Logically, probably not the best time for Drake to be living in LA, right? But now you can see with that home, there's these underground waterfalls with TVs and bars and statues of these half-naked women. There's the master bedroom with 2 marble bathtubs, and it's hidden behind the secret bookshelf. There's pools, there's water slides, there's tennis courts, there's horseback riding. This is like an estate, a compound that's meant for partying. That's why it's called the YOLO Estate. Vlad is, emphasizing that this was the compound that a lot of funny business was going on in. I shouldn't even say funny business. I should say disgusting business. And essentially, this is where he at least heard, very allegedly, that people were paid off to stay silent about whatever Drake had going on at that house. And there were stories from around that time that if they didn't align with what Vlad's saying, they at least emphasized that Drake was doing a lot of partying with a lot of women at around that time. So Drake bought the house initially in 2012, but then expanded it to an entire compound by 2015. And this is where we saw he did a lot of partying. Kendrick referenced this on 616 in LA also, right? At the beginning of that song. And on a side note, stay tuned for all the 1-year anniversaries of every diss track from the Beef. I'll be, breaking each one of them down on this channel on their 1-year anniversaries. But on 616 in LA, on the beginning of that song, he raps in Drake's perspective. Not necessarily about Drake's LA compound, but instead about the yachts that he bought and that he was taking out with a lot of different women. And of course, the song is called 616 in LA, which is a callback to all the timestamp records that Drake does, where he raps about his life of luxury, his current headspace, what's going on in his life at the moment. So Kendrick starts it off, Off-White Sunseeker at the marina. The Sunseeker is a yacht, and Kendrick follows that up rapping, F a phantom, I like to buy yachts when I get the fever. Around 2017 was when we saw Drake on a lot of yachts, specifically allegedly inviting Millie Bobby Brown on one of his yachts in 2017. I guess I don't really need to say allegedly, right? Like, she posted this picture in November of 2017 where she puts this camera emoji to imply that Drake took the picture. You could see it's a yacht docked on a marina with a bunch of other yachts. The caption is Choose Kindness, photographed by Drake. She's laughing in the picture. I could only imagine this was Drake's yacht, taking a picture of Millie Bobby Brown on the yacht. We know that Millie Bobby Brown was asked about, her friendship with Drake. This is when I believe she was 14. She said they had a great friendship. She said that Drake gave her advice on dating and on boys. And she says when she's asked, what specifically do they talk about? She said that stays in the text messages. There's a lot of other layers to that Kendrick line. Again, we're going to review 616 in a couple weeks on its 1-year anniversary. That song is crazy, crazy layered. So stay tuned for that. But he makes some other callbacks to Drake's, party endeavors, his vanity-fueled lifestyle. I mean, talking about here alone, I like to buy yachts when I get the fever. Drake had a song called Teenage Fever in 2017, and in that same year, that's when we get that picture of Millie Bobby Brown, probably allegedly on Drake's yacht. He continues in the next bar saying, "Wine cooler spill on my white t-shirt, the sightseer." We know Drake's favorite drink is a wine cooler, right? That's not a glass of wine. That is a fruity, alcoholic cocktail that Drake is always seen drinking. And what's interesting is that Madison Beer, who was born in 1999, so today she is 27 years old, and Drake is about 39. Remember that. I'm not saying, Madison Beer was underage when she was hanging out with Drake. And she was actually dating Zach Bia, who is a DJ and I believe a good friend of Drake's. So it makes sense that they were hanging out. But Madison Beer did tell a story about how she went to one of Drake's parties and a girl accidentally spilt a drink all over Drake's white sweatsuit. What did Kendrick rap in 616 in LA? Aside from saying, "Have you ever thought that OVO was working for me?" Aside from rapping in Drake's perspective, he said, "Wine cooler spill on my white t-shirt, the sightseer." Madison Beer is telling a story about how years ago she was at a Drake party, likely with a lot of her friends who were also very young, and a drink was spilled all over Drake's white shirt. This is all, again, around the same era that Drake is throwing these massive parties in his Calabasas compound on his yachts, that 2015 to damn near 2022 era, up until the point where he sold the place. Early in that era as well, 2016, right after he just bought that new place in LA to build out his whole YOLO compound, Drake is seen backstage at Rihanna's tour, getting very close in a picture with this girl by the name of Bella B. Harris, who was born in the year 2000. So by 2016, you do the math how old she was. And 2 years later, on her 18th birthday, apparently Drake shut down an entire restaurant to have dinner with her. That would be in 2018, the same year that he had the song Nice for What, where he rapped, "High school pics, you were even bad then." The same era where he's building out this massive Hidden Hills compound where he's throwing these parties, talking about he has a bigger pool than Kanye. The same compound that Vlad said some shady stuff went on in and Drake paid people off to stay silent. Same era Kendrick's rapping about where Drake is getting drinks spilled on him, throwing these yacht parties with Millie Bobby Brown possibly allegedly being in attendance at one in 2017. Again, it's important to note that all these people came out and said Drake did not do anything to them or with them. So, there's nothing to say here that Drake, again, did anything against the law per se, as far as we know, right? And everything is alleged. All I'm saying is it's very disturbing or strange how Vlad is describing the specific era where Drake was in the Hidden Hills throwing these parties at this massive compound that he had spent years building up. And this is the same exact time that we get all these individual stories from Bella Harris to Millie Bobby Brown to Madison Beer. And speaking of Madison Beer, I actually made a mistake. So she was born in 1999. That means today she is 26, right? I said 27, she's 26. Now, the only person I can connect them to, the only mutual friend that they might have, is Zach Bia. Zach Bia was on Drake's tour in 2022. He was the DJ. Zach Bia dated Madison Beer. It makes sense that he brought her along with her friends along to party with Drake. When did Zach Bia and Madison Beer start dating? They started dating in 2017. When was Drake in that yacht era that Kendrick was referencing, where Madison Beer posted a picture allegedly probably on Drake's yacht? 2017. Madison Beer, how old was she in 2017 if she was born in 1999? She had just turned 18. They split up, her and Zach Bia, in 2019. So that means if that mutual connection between Drake and Madison Beer was Zach Bia, and that Drake was only hanging out with Madison Beer when she was dating Zach Bia, it had to be anywhere from 2017 to 2019. So when she was 17 turning 18, all the way up to when she was 19 turning 20. She tells that story of her being at a Drake party and a drink spilling all over his clothing. Again, if the only connection between Madison Beer and Drake is Zach Bia, she was dating him between 2017 and 2019. This is all alleged. This is just from sources online. I'm only reading sources online. I'm not making any of this up, and it's all alleged. But just think about those timelines for a second, right? And again, Drake was in that Hidden Hills compound YOLO partying phase during 2015 to when he sold it in 2022. Around that same time, shout out to Jalopy Bungus, he had someone send him a hoodie that Drake actually sold on his website, which was a Hidden Hills hoodie. And on it, it said, "Isn't everybody hiding something?" So basically this hoodie said Hidden Hills on it. And on the back, it said, "Isn't everybody hiding something?"
This is the scary part. Around the same time, there was a hoodie being sold. This information was brought to me. This hoodie was posted around this time, right? It's a Hidden Hills hoodie. Costs $120. You can go look this up for yourself. What it says on the back is, "Isn't everybody hiding something?" Hold on. The hoodie says, "Isn't everybody hiding something?" This is a Hidden Hills hoodie.
The same era where we're getting all these stories of Drake with all these individuals, right? The same era where Vlad is saying people were paid off to stay silent about the parties or about whatever was going on in that Calabasas compound. Very strange. Very, very, very strange. And all I'll say is this, right? Drake is suing for defamation over Not Like Us. Drake is now fighting to make sure a judge bangs the gavel over the fact that UMG, the record label that distributed the song, knows the content in the song was a lie. AKA allegations against Drake being a PDF were fabricated. They were not true, right? As far as I could see, UMG has two defenses within this case, two ways they could go. Either they really go out of their way to try to prove that there is concrete evidence or at least stories that align with Drake actually being a PDF. Therefore, what Kendrick said in that song was not defamation because it was the truth. Or they go with the fact that what Kendrick said in that song was hyperbole, which seems like the route they're going right now. Basically, it was exaggerated truth. It was all for the sake of the diss track for the rap battle, and that Kendrick doesn't believe it and the world doesn't believe it. And I think this is what Drake is trying to go for, right? He wants UMG to say, no, Your Honor, this song is not actually saying Drake is a PDF because Drake is not actually a PDF, because he needs the world to think that he is not a PDF. And I just think it's interesting that Vlad, of all people, is saying something like this, right? Like in the same interview, Vlad talked about having ties with people who have ties to the federal government, the feds, saying that they believe Diddy is actually going to get bail.
I'm not 100% sure of this. Someone I know who, if you watch Vlad TV, you've seen this person on my show, had a contact with the feds, and someone at the feds told him that Diddy's getting bail. Someone from the federal system told someone I know that Diddy's getting bail.
And I bring that up to say, like, Vlad obviously has these connections, right? Like, there's a reason people call Vlad the feds. Say what you will about the content that Vlad puts out, but his investigative work is usually pretty solid. I mean, it was thanks to his line of questioning that Keefe D essentially confessed to being involved in the unaliving of Tupac. There was also that famous clip of Vlad interviewing Lil Baby, talking about how Lil Baby was fighting people in jail, specifically, I believe, white people, or specifically the COs, I forget which one. And Lil Baby just looked at him in absolute shock, like, how would you get that minute piece of information? Like, Vlad is the Nardwuar of criminal information. Like, when there's crimes happening, Vlad is digging around, getting as much information as possible from seemingly a lot of reliable inside sources. For him to be saying all this is just interesting, right? And I also thought this was very interesting as well. When Drake released For All the Dogs, he had a song on there where he was talking about this woman saying she was 21, she was still a savage. And that album was not great, right? We could all admit that it should have been called For All the Duds, not For All the Dogs. But Joe Budden obviously agreed. He went on his podcast and criticized the album vastly, saying that specifically Drake needs to start hanging around people his age. And that could have been due to a lot of things, right? Specifically, probably that literal lyric where Drake says she was 21, she was a savage, but also due to the fact that a lot of the subject matter on that album showed that Drake hasn't really matured. He's still living this life of partying, of indulgence, of materialism. He hasn't evolved as an artist or as a human. So that's what Joe Budden was basically getting at. And Joe Budden has been very critical of Drake for years now, right? Drake very rarely responds to Joe Budden or anyone for that matter's criticism of him. And why should he, right? Like, he's still able to sell records. I mean, even after Not Like Us, where, you know, now Conan O'Brien at the Oscars is calling him a PDF, he's still managing to get this hit with Nokia. Like, he's still selling records. It doesn't really matter. So he doesn't often respond to criticism, but for some reason, something Joe said in that critique prompted Drake to write an entire Bible on Instagram ripping into Joe Budden, how Joe Budden is a failed rapper who has resorted to crapping on other rappers to validate his insecurities over his lack of success. He went on this very unusual rant, which is very out of Drake's character. And on a side note, I started working on a Drake versus Joe Budden breakdown. Drop a comment if you want that, because Joe Budden has some crazy diss tracks against Drake. Like, he really sparked that whole flame that Kendrick and Pusha T then took the torch and ran with. But yeah, anyways, Akademiks ended up saying that he spoke to Drake after that, and Drake said, listen, I wasn't mad that Joe actually criticized the album. I was mad that he was implying I was romantically involved with younger women. And Joe Budden got on his podcast and said, dude, you literally rapped in the song saying she was young, she was 21, she was still a savage. Like, it's in your bars. I'm only getting this information off your bars. What are you so paranoid about? Like, what prompted you to break character and go on this whole massive rant over one comment about me saying that you're not acting your age? Why did that trigger you so much, right? And then months later, Drake drops the tailor-made freestyle, where he raps in Tupac's perspective using Tupac AI vocals, giving Kendrick a pep talk to finally release his diss track, and saying, talk about Drake liking young girls, that's a gift for me. Heard it on the Budden podcast, so it's gotta be true. Essentially saying, like, listen, bro, like, I know you're scared to drop this diss track, but you could just say that Drake, likes young women. That was a rumor that Joe Budden propped up on his podcast, so it has to be true. And it's like, it's crazy that Drake was so triggered by this that he would literally include it in a diss song, trying to 8 Mile himself, saying that, this was an insult that people had on his reputation and that Kendrick should use it against him, and that it was all contrived from the Joe Budden podcast, when Joe was only going off of Drake's lyrics. Drake subconsciously admitted to being romantically involved with a woman of age, 21 years old, but a young woman nonetheless, when Drake was, 37, I believe at the time, pushing 38, right? And here he is going on a massive out-of-character rant at Joe Budden over a simple comment saying, I think you should start being with women your age. And now we have him filing lawsuits specifically to defend his character, as he should defend his character over a horrible allegation like that, but specifically to emphasize to the world that he is not a PDF. And me personally, I don't really like talking about this type of stuff, right? It's very disturbing to me. I like to keep things more centered on the music, but this is a very disturbing remark that DJ Vlad made, right? And he's usually known to have, they call him the feds, right? They call him the feds. He does very expansive investigative work over rappers' criminal pasts, and that's probably the wrong thing to do, but nonetheless, I do believe that over time, over the years of doing this, he has racked up some strong sources, to say the least. And just the timeline of how all these things line up, all during that era of Drake building up this Calabasas compound, getting drinks spilled on him by a younger Madison Beer's friends, or, taking pictures of Millie Bobby Brown, or renting out that dinner spot for that 18-year-old model, making that t-shirt that says we're all hiding something. Vlad specifically pointed to that era as being the era that Drake paid people off to keep things secret. Now, I do want to emphasize again, obviously, besides the fact that no allegations have ever been made on Drake, which is what actually prompted Vlad to say this, Vlad is also not emphasizing that it was Drake specifically who did anything wrong. It could have been people around him or things that just went on at his parties, at his compound. I'm happy to, discuss, rumors with you guys, if you could call this that. I don't usually like to touch on subjects like this unless there's actual court cases filed and published, because it's the worst, badge you could put on someone, right? And to speculate on it, to me, is just very disturbing. I'm happy to bring you guys all the ghostwriting rumors and, deep dive into those. But there's a reason why I've held off on, touching on this entire topic since these rumors exploded after An All Like Us. Same thing with the criminal past, right? I don't care to go into the RICO cases and the, crime and the violence and stuff. It's not really what I'm here for, right? I'm very detached from that. I'm obviously a tourist to the culture. I'd rather speak on, the music that I love and everything that surrounds that. Again, happy to go into the ghostwriting rumors. I'm bringing this up because there's a lot of weird consistencies with this timeline that Vlad is mentioning. So, when the timetables line up, it's getting to a point where it's almost too disturbing to not talk about. But again, everything's all alleged. I am not implying that Drake is a PDF. There is zero proof of that. I'm just going off of, the disturbing things that Vlad said here. And on a lighter note, I just put out a video talking about 7-minute drill. Did you guys forget about that? It's a much better video than this. We'll touch on J. Cole's very short involvement in the Kendrick and Drake beef, We'll break down his entire diss track against Kendrick, all the events leading up to that diss track and his subsequent apology, everything J. Cole has done so far to make a comeback from that horrible moment. And yeah, that was a much better video than this one. A lot more lighthearted, to say the least. So let me know what you guys think, man. Let me know what you guys think. Is Drake hiding something in the Hidden Hills? I mean, he said we're all hiding something, aren't we? So maybe he is as well. Let me know in the comments, and I will catch you guys in the next one.